Hello guys and welcome back to the channel. It's been a minute, it's been a while, but I'm back with a team selection video for Game Week 10 with a little bit of a review of how I got on in Game Week 9, as well as a season review so far where I've been missing for so long, and of course as well just some data points and some interesting bits of information that might help us in our decision making for Game Week 10. So as I say, it's been a minute, guys. Thank you for all your support and patience ongoing throughout this period of dry content for me. But as you understand, I'm sure for those who are returning, family are always going to come first. And it's been it's been a busy period for me, but I think I can manage at least one video a week moving forward. So let's see how we get on. But let's jump into the content and see how we're doing. So first of all, we'll look at the Game Week 9 review. I made a Saka to Palmer move. I felt that when Saka missed out in the midweek, that I thought, he's probably going to be a doubt for this game, and I don't really want somebody of that amount of value sat on my bench. Of course, it turns out he plays and he scores, but ultimately I'll be bringing him back on a long-term horizon anyway at some point. But Palmer looked great as an alternative. Unlucky only to get 10 points in my opinion. Of course, VAR overturning a penalty shout right at the end of that Chelsea match. As well as the fact of scoring an offside goal early on. So 10 points was still a great haul from him, could have been more. Of course, triple captain was active, as you can see. I thought this was a very favourable fixture with Southampton in a little bit of turmoil at the moment in the season. So 6 points isn't the greatest of extra points I got from that chip activation, but it certainly isn't the worst in my season history. So happy to take away that extra 6. It's a chip that I don't think we're going to have much use out of in terms of double game weeks this season anyway. There's a significant amount of reduced ones, we think. And of course, we have multiple other chips to be able to use. So in some ways, I'm kind of glad that it's gone. Of course, pulling up all of the other rest of the points here, Chris Wood once again delivering a 13-pointer. What an absolute buy he's been on my Game Week 6 wildcard. Brian Burmo again just proving that he is just the best budget midfielder that we can own, I think, in FPL this season. Another 15 points from him. Backline not doing too bad. A bit of a, maybe some would argue, a possible jammy assist from Sells. Route 1 football from Forest for that Chris Wood second goal. Of course, for FPL rules, I saw a little bit on X where there was some deliberation as to should it be given, shouldn't it be given. Of course, Chris Wood was the destination or the intended target. Sorry, it did end up in Chris Wood's in Chris Wood's path, even though Wout Faes obviously headed the ball onto him. It's still classed as a Sells assist. There's certainly some inconsistency going on with FPL, though. I think it's adding to maybe a bit of the drama and some of the roller coaster that we're all having as managers this season. But Lewis turning up for once and actually getting me a 6-pointer, which was great. And Ryan Aït-Nouri, even though they conceded 2 goals, still showing up with a goal himself. Although he is now on, I think, 4 yellow cards. So very, very thin line for him to be suspended for a match, unfortunately. Not really much to say about the rest of the team here, but of course a surprise Fabianski appearance against Manchester United. Some might argue it's not a surprise because Areola really hasn't maybe done as well as he did under Moyes in previous campaigns, but showing up with a 3-pointer on my bench, but one that I might actually consider playing in some of the tougher fixtures that Sells has. As any long-term viewers of the channel will know, that I don't think goalkeeper transfers are very worthwhile. But for sure, we're into the 752k mark now in terms of rank with that 79-pointer. We'll have a look in a brief moment of the season so far in terms of a recap for me. But I'm very happy to have got another major green arrow following on from that Game Week 6 wildcard and a pretty rough and turbulent start to the season. So team value is also looking good. But let's have a look at the season so far then. So you can see started off at about 2.5 million in terms of Game Week 1 and 2. Didn't really kind of move away from that until a really catastrophic Game Week 6 wildcard in terms of the week. I went all the way down to 4 million. I'm not sure if that was the week that Cole Palmer absolutely banged. I think it may have been, and that contributed a lot probably to some of that rank fall. But yeah, nearly 4 million at Game Week 6, and now we're into 752k. So you can see how volatile the ranks still are. So I know there's lots of content creators that say rank doesn't matter at this point in the season, and you can kind of see why, because there's such a small gap between such large numbers at this stage of the season. As we get towards the back end and maybe more of the business end of the season, as we call it, of course, there'll be a lot of people that will fall off in terms of their engagement with the game. And just generally, I feel like it's an easier time to climb those ranks. So very happy with where I stand after game week 10, to be honest, although that I have, of course, used the triple captain and the wild card. As you can see at the bottom of the screen there, game week 6 was my wild card, game week 9 was my triple captain. So maybe one less trick to kind of pull out of the sleeve really later on in the season to maybe push me back up some further rankings, but very, very happy with that ranking. Moving into the next section, then we can talk about my transfer plans. Now, Kai Havertz hasn't really delivered what I wanted him to deliver. And of course, with Bukayo Saka back from injury, he is, of course, I think the Arsenal asset that we'd all like to own. He just seems to be involved in everything that Arsenal do. And of course, he has got penalties above that as well. Of course, with Martin Odegaard missing still, I do think that Arsenal's relative attacking output has been maybe a little bit lessened by his absence. But ultimately, Havertz, I don't think is providing enough consistency for me to keep him in the team longer term. Saka's definitely an asset that I'll probably be looking at as an Arsenal attacker. And maybe one of the routes is just to sell him with my one free transfer this week and just simply go to either Raul Jimenez or Cunha that you can see on screen. Both of them really, really great outputs in recent weeks. And I think their fixtures as well are also ones to shout about. So, Havertz at that 8.2 million, I think he is now. I could only sell him for 8.0, I think, and because I bought him at 8.1, I think, on the wild card. But genuinely, I don't think that he's going to give us long-term value at that price. I think the more and more we look at these forward line players like Chris Wood, of course, scoring 30 points or whatever it is since game week 6. You've got Cunha, you've got Raul Jimenez. Of course, you've even got Delap of Ipswich. There's so many budget enablers, even Danny Welbeck of Brighton. I think that maybe we should look at that structure in a little bit more detail. And maybe those that Havertz, the Solanke, that type of price point is not delivering us the value that we're looking for. So that's certainly one route that I could go with my transfers this week. A second route is there is just a man, as you can see on the thumbnail, that is really killing me every single week. And maybe it is just time for a change and time to follow Mr. Consistent in Mo Salah. It would cost me a -4, although because we're at such early stages in the season and the rank is so volatile anyway, I don't mind. It's my first hit of the season, potentially, if I do this. But it would involve then Haaland to Cunha, which I think is still a very good shout in terms of the fixtures, and Semenyo being a massive upgrade to Mohamed Salah, and possibly then in with a captaincy shout this week instead of Haaland, who is actually playing Bournemouth away. So I think that, bringing Mohamed Salah in not only solves that kind of consistent FPL delivery aspect, but also a great captaincy option for us in that short-term horizon. And we'll go into a bit more detail of kind of why I'm thinking about selling Haaland. He's, of course, a very expensive asset in the game this season. And if we're not going to be putting on the armband on him, then it kind of begs the question as to why we should be owning a player of that value if we're not going to be putting the armband on him. So if I do go down this road, then there is, of course, these options and different options that we have in terms of captaincy. Now, of course, I haven't put every single player on this chart in front of you here. These are just simply the premiums in terms of who we would usually, I would say, put the captain on. And of course, as you can see here, everything that's highlighted green across the next 5 game weeks is effectively where I think we could argue a captaincy shout would be possible. So in game week 10, as we can see here, Bournemouth away for Haaland, Brighton at home for Mohamed Salah, and Aston Villa at home for Son Heung-min if he is also past fit. So 3 captaincy shouts ultimately, but I think out of all 3 of those, my preference would definitely be Mohamed Salah. Brighton at home. Brighton, certainly from a defensive point of view, aren't keeping clean sheets. And we can see from the attacking threat that Liverpool have, it's always Salah that's involved in some shape or form. It doesn't matter how many goals they score. It just always seems to be that he is involved in at least one of them. And I think I want a piece of that pie because ultimately his price is a lot less than Haaland. With those 2 moves in mind, by the way, with that -4, I would still end up with £2 million in the bank, which is absolutely outrageous to think that I would have Salah, Son and Palmer in my midfield in terms of current midfielders, with an eye to maybe moving Son to Saka at some point along the line and still having that flexibility to upgrade defence, maybe go back to a Trent Alexander-Arnold at some point. It just seems like a massive restructural difference by removing Haaland, and I think this could be a good time to do it. Then you can see from 11 till 13, I don't think that Haaland is ever going to really be a captaincy shout as long as you own a second premium. So if you've got a Haaland and a Palmer, or a Haaland and a Salah, a Haaland and Saka, it doesn't matter which way you look at it. There's always going to be, I think, a better option from somebody in game week 11, 12 and 13. So if we take 11, for an example, Brighton away for Haaland. Of course, I've just mentioned about Brighton being leaky, but it's, of course, at Anfield, so it is a slightly different argument there for Salah. But Brighton away, okay, you could argue that is a reasonable fixture for Haaland, but I certainly think that Villa at home for Salah and Ipswich at home for Heung-min Son is definitely a much better option for us. We've seen how leaky Ipswich are, although they are, of course, delivering goals. They are certainly conceding a lot. So, again, if Son is past fit for that stage, which I think from Postecoglou's comments, it does look to be the case, I think we can definitely argue that game week 11 seems to be Son's favourite. Son would definitely come out as, I think, one of the favourites for captaincy that week. Then you look at game week 12, Haaland with Tottenham at home. However, Salah's got Southampton away, Leicester away for Palmer, Nottingham Forest at home for Saka. Maybe the toughest of the three there, but ultimately Southampton and Leicester for Salah and Palmer seem like fantastic options. So again, you can maybe take a screenshot or take a snapshot of this table here, but the idea is really to kind of understand if you're a Haaland owner and maybe you're in a better position than I am for transfers, this could be a prime opportunity to actually jump off of Haaland, because he hasn't been delivering based on his XG and his numbers this part of the season so far. He's still the top scorer of the Premier League, and missing him is certainly going to be there. But for 15 plus million pounds in an FPL budget terms, maybe it's kind of worth watching the pain of him scoring a few goals here and there, while making sure I still have a solid captaincy option elsewhere in my team that is another premium option. So I think that there's definitely a conversation to be had about removing Haaland potentially on that short term. So I think this is definitely one of the arguments for it. If we have a look at just game week 10 in isolation then and look at captaincy data, we can see 4 options here. There is Chris Wood involved just because I think his consistency warrants him being in the picture for this game week specifically. There's a bit of data here. If you've not seen this before, ultimately what I look at is the last 4 game weeks in terms of opposition that the player is going to be facing in the game week. The last 4 game weeks that opposition has conceded in terms of XG non-penalty. And then, of course, the FPL points scored by the asset themselves over the past 4 weeks. You can see Haaland, as mentioned, the drop-off has been quite significant. He's only scored 12 points in the last 4 game weeks, and he has been the captain for a lot of managers across that period, meaning that we haven't even scored really what you consider the optimum points each week. Then, of course, you have Mohamed Salah there, 35 FPL points in the last 4 game weeks. I think at his price point, and as well as the consistency he offers, I think that just warrants, again, the previous discussion about captaincy options. Palmer again on penalties for a Chelsea team that is absolutely flying under new management this season. He scored 43 points, but it does include, of course, that 25-pointer he scored in game week 6. And then we have Chris Wood, again, I think a very consistent striker that's playing a West Ham opponent that really does concede quite a lot of chances. So I definitely think that he is also a possible differential captain shout if you really want to go a little bit west to gain some rank. But ultimately, Haaland, Salah and Palmer look like the options that most people will probably aim for this week. And of course, then that means that we do have only one winner, really. And I do think that Mohamed Salah, as mentioned before, bringing him in quite forcefully with that -4 this week would only mean that I'll probably put the armband on him, especially with the removal of Haaland. I just think, again, the consistency and the fixture this week look absolutely fantastic for him. Then we can move into the team selection. We can have a look at, first of all, the defensive lineup. So we have got Sells in goal, playing West Ham at home. Of course, did score 2 goals against Manchester United, but really the first half, they didn't look anywhere near it. Of course, there was some changes made by the manager at half-time that definitely pushed the structure of the game in a different way. And the outcome, of course. But ultimately, I think Forest here are looking great and strong for a clean sheet. I think their defensive value is absolutely phenomenal. They've got great XGC numbers over the whole season, as well as the short-term game week horizon. So I think Sells absolute steal at £4.6 million. I'm very happy that I brought him in on the wild card. We then have Mikolenko, Ryan Aït-Nouri and Rico Lewis. All 3 of them have fantastic fixtures, although I'm not hopeful that Lewis will actually start this game. We'll see. It depends. I do think he's up for maybe a little bit of rotation at this point. I do have a little bit of bench cover that may be able to help us out, but ultimately I think Bournemouth might be a fixture that Lewis will get rotated in. But let's see. Stranger things have, of course, happened with Pep. We can move into the midfield next then, and if I do go down the Salah route, then he would, of course, replace Semenyo and come in as one of the new transfers for game week 10. We also have Palmer against Manchester United away, who, as we're seeing, just aren't keeping clean sheets, are conceding a lot of chances. And even at Old Trafford, to be honest, I think Palmer could definitely show up here. He's an absolute phenomenal asset. Of course, there was the 4-3 win last season where he absolutely hauled. I honestly think that he's a fantastic asset to own moving forward, and this fixture is great for him. Aston Villa at home for Son then, potentially going to be past fit. He is still flagged on FPL at the moment, but I'm hoping that he comes back in after missing out on game week 9. We have in Burmo again, another consistent player playing Fulham away. Not the easiest fixture, as defensively Fulham can be quite good. But I still think, ultimately a man that's on penalties and a man, again, that just seems to be very consistent and involved in a lot of what his team are doing. I think he's a fantastic value asset to own. Then we move into the front line. Of course, I did not scream really about Havertz being a long-term option at the beginning of the video, talking about him being a transfer move out. But if I want to get Mohamed Salah, then I basically need to forfeit and kind of keep at least one Arsenal asset in this team then, and I think Havertz, he may tick me over just until the point that I want to bring Saka in, and then maybe I can start tweaking that front line even further. But for now, that would mean Havertz playing Newcastle away. Not the worst fixture for him, but hopefully he can give some return for me there. Chris Wood again against West Ham. I think he's definitely got the potential to get us more output there. And Cunha coming in potentially against that Crystal Palace team that also, again, haven't really been off to a great start. They've only got their first win of the campaign this weekend. Wolves still without a win, but yet Cunha being so involved in a lot of their attacking threat. And I think both Ryan Aït-Nouri and Cunha as Wolves assets for the longer term seem to be a fantastic option. So looking forward to potentially making those moves to the team. So that's what it looks like for the most part. And then as we jump finally into captaincy and vice captaincy, we would put the armband onto Mo Salah as mentioned. Vice captaincy would sit comfortably on Palmer as well, I think. And of course, then in terms of the bench, I do have Fabianski playing Nottingham Forest away, but definitely Sells gets the shout over him, even if Fabianski gets the nod. Gabriel, yellow flagged, playing Newcastle away. I think that's still quite a positive fixture. So as mentioned earlier, if Lewis does get some random rotation or bench this week, then I think Gabriel coming in as auto sub would be absolutely brilliant. And of course, if Son also doesn't feature, then potentially I get him off the bench or Rodgers as an alternative attacker against Tottenham away. So not the best bench cover in terms of assets, but ultimately there are playing players there as long as we get good news about Gabriel. So very happy with the squad moving forward. But as I say, let's see what moves I end up making. Finally, just before we close off the video, then a little shout to the mini league. This isn't a prize mini league because I obviously haven't made content as much over the course of the last sort of year or 9 months or so. So it is just simply the kind of youtube.com FPL link fun league, if you like. I'm currently sitting 4th in my own mini league because there just isn't that many people in there yet. But feel free to join. I will have the code in the description of the video, and it is coming up on screen very, very shortly. But ultimately, I think I recognise at least one name, and that's the top of the chart here, Patrick Floor, Fast Flow, the FPL name there. 600 points so far, absolutely flying. I don't think you've used too many chips as well to get there, if I'm not mistaken, which is absolutely fantastic. So well done to you. Being top of the league. But as I say, feel free to come and join us over there. It's just a bit of fun, almost just from bragging rights perspective, I guess, for the community. And as you can see here, it's open all season, and there is the code for you to copy and put into FPL. And I think that's about going to wrap the video up, guys. So thank you very much for tuning in. As I say, apologies for being so distant and kind of dry on the content for so long. But as you can understand, personal commitments are always going to come first. But I'm looking forward to jumping back into making some regular FPL content again. I'm just going to try and not burn myself out too much this time and just maybe focus on one important video per week. So hopefully you enjoyed it. Remember to give a thumbs up on the video and subscribe if you're new to the channel if you want to see some more content and you like what you see. But thanks very much again for tuning in, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.